Welcome to Mr. R's art class. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thumbs, subs, and ring that bell. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do a grid transfer with a realistic image. We're going to start with this printout of this apple, and then this is what your apple should look like once we transfer it over to a blank sheet of paper. We're going to transfer this apple onto this regular sheet of paper here, and then we're going to go ahead and use value. We're going to use graphite to go ahead and shade this apple in to make it look more realistic. So we've done grid transfers before, but we have done a grid transfer on something that's actually realistic. So we're going to go ahead and attempt to redraw this apple on a regular sheet of paper using a grid transfer. Then we're going to go ahead and shade it in, and I'll show you how to draw some of these water drops here to make it look a little bit more realistic. So first thing we need to do is put a grid on this printout. We're going to put a 1/2 inch frame on the sides here. Then we're going to do a 1 inch grid. So 1/2 inch frame, 1 inch grid. Then we're going to put a 1/2 inch frame here on the regular sheet of paper, a 1/2 inch frame on the left, 1/2 inch frame on the bottom, and we're going to put a 1.5 inch grid on this regular sheet of paper. So on the printout, it's going to be a 1/2 inch frame on both the printout and the regular sheet of paper, but the grid on the printout is going to be 1 inch, and then the grid on the regular sheet of paper is going to be 1.5 inches. So let's go ahead and get started on the grid for the printout. So on the printout here, we're going to line up our 0 of our ruler. 0 is going to be that first black line there. 0 is going to be that first black line. 0 is going to be that first black line. We're going to line up with the left-hand side, and we're going to make a mark at a 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch right here in the middle of the 1 inch. So we're going to find the 1 inch, and you have this second medium-sized line here. So we have one medium-sized line, second medium-sized line, and then 3 medium-sized line there. So we're going to go ahead and make a mark at the second medium-sized line, and then we're going to scoot our ruler over and make a mark at every inch. So 0 is going to be lined up with that mark there. We're going to make a mark at every inch. The 1 inch marks are going to be the big lines next to each number. The big lines next to each number. Once you get to 5, you should be on the right hand side of the paper. So we're going to go ahead and slide your ruler up. You're not going to rotate your ruler, you're not going to rotate your paper, you're just going to slide your ruler to the top. Make sure that 0, that first black line on your ruler, is lined up with the left hand side. You're going to make a mark again at the 1/2 inch mark, so that second medium sized mark. So you have that first medium sized mark, second and third medium sized mark before you get to the 1 inch. So that medium sized mark, you're going to make a mark there at the ruler. Scoot your ruler over so that that 0 is lined up with that mark you just made, and you're making a mark at every inch. So the inch marks are those big lines next to each number. By the time you get to 5, you should be on the right hand side of your paper. Then you're going to go ahead and connect those marks. So again, the size of the grid on this printout is going to be 1 inch. On the big piece of paper, it's going to be 1.5 inches. So on this printout, it's okay if you draw these lines a lot darker, so that you could actually see the grid. On the regular sheet of paper, we're going to draw that grid a little bit lighter. So now we have this grid that goes vertical, all drawn up. So now we need to rotate our paper and then draw these lines that go horizontal. So we're going to rotate our paper so that the frame's on top. This frame, this 1/2 inch frame, should be on top. You're going to go ahead and grab your ruler one more time. Make sure that 0 is lined up with the bottom of your paper or the left side of your paper. 0 is that first black line. Make a mark at a 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch is that second medium-sized line there. That second medium-sized line. You're going to scoot your 0 over to that mark we just made and make a mark at every single inch. So we're going to mark off every single inch. And we're going to slide our ruler to the top. Make sure that 0 is lined up with the left hand side again, making a mark at a 1/2 inch, so a 1/2 inch there. Scooting your 0 over to that mark we just made, and then we're making a mark here at every inch. So the big lines next to each number here, that's where we're making a mark. So if you see the number, you should find that big line next to each number. We're making a mark there. By the time you get to 8, you should be at the end of your paper. Go ahead and connect those marks. So again, it's okay if you draw these lines a lot darker on this printout. Once you get to the regular sheet of paper, those lines should be a lot lighter than what we're drawing right now. Okay, so you could rotate your paper so it's standing in front of you correctly. And then you're going to have this little square down here in the bottom left-hand corner. You're going to draw an X. So draw an X in that bottom left-hand corner. Then on the left-hand side, we're going to do our ABCs starting from the X. So from the X, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And you could do H if you want. On the bottom, we're going to do numbers. So in this frame down here at the bottom, starting from the X, we're going to do numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so there's our grid here for our printout. Now we're going to get started on the grid on the regular sheet of paper. On the regular sheet of paper, we're going to go ahead and create a frame on the left-hand side and on the bottom. This grid is going to be a little bit different than we had previously. That grid that we had previously was a 1-inch grid. This is going to be a 1.5-inch grid. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our paper in front of us vertically. That means our paper should be longest from top to bottom or from bottom to top. You're going to line up your 0. 0 is that first black line on your ruler. 0 should be lined up with the left-hand side. 0 is that first black line on your ruler. That should be lined up with the left-hand side. And you're going to make a mark at a 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch is that second medium-sized line, or you could find the 1 inch. Kind of divide that by 2, and that should be your 1/2 inch there. That should be a medium-sized mark there. It's second medium-sized mark. Then you're going to scoot your 0 over. Scoot your 0. 0 is going to be that first black line lined up, and we're going to make a mark at every 1.5 inches. So there's an inch, and then you need to find that 1/2 inch mark there. So there's a 1/2 inch mark. Make a mark at every 1.5 inches. At an 1.5 inches. Okay, then that second mark is going to be at 3 inches. And then after that, it's going to be 4.5. 4.5. So that second medium-sized mark. Then 6 inches. Then 7.5. 7.5. So that by the time you get to 8, 8 should be lined up with the left side of your paper. Okay, so we're going to slide our ruler to the top here. Slide our ruler to the top. 0 should be lined up with the left-hand side. First mark that we're going to make is for the frame, so it's going to be at a 1/2 inch. It's going to be at a 1/2 inch. Scoot your 0 over to that 1/2 inch mark. Then we're going to make a mark at every inch plus a half. So every inch plus a half. 1.5. Every inch plus a half. Second mark should be at 3 inches. Then at 4.5. Then at 6. And then lastly 7.5. So for you, I want you to connect these marks lightly so that you're eventually able to erase them. So this is just kind of a grid or an outline or a guide to help you figure out where some of these measurements are and compare them to the printout. Okay, so this is still kind of dark here, so your lines need to be a lot lighter so that when you erase them, you can't see these lines. Okay, so we have a frame on the left-hand side and a frame on the right-hand side. That's okay, so we can rotate our paper so we at least have one of these frames on top. No matter which way you rotate it, it should be the same. So now your paper should be sitting in front of you horizontally. That means your paper should be longest from left to right or from right to left. You're going to line up your 0 again. 0 is that first black line. 0 should be lined up with the left-hand side. You're going to make a mark at a 1/2 inch. All right, so that second medium-sized line. So there's the first medium-sized line that I'm talking about. Then that second one just above the W. Then you're going to scoot your 0 over to that mark you just made. And you're going to make a mark at every 1.5 inches. So every inch plus a half. All right, so every inch plus a half. So at 3 inches. 4.5, then at 6 inches, 7.5, and 9. That's going to be your last mark there. By the time you get to 10.5, that should be lined up with the top of your paper. You're going to slide your ruler to the top here. You're going to do the same thing here on top. You could line your ruler under that frame that you have on top. So 0 should be lined up with the left hand side. You're going to make a mark at a 1/2 inch. So 1/2 of an inch. 0 should be lined up with that 0. 0 should be lined up with that 1/2 inch mark. Okay, now we're going to make a mark at every 1.5 inches. So every 1.5 inches. Okay, so the first mark is at 1.5 inches. Second mark is going to be at 3 inches. 4.5. 6 inches. 7.5. and 9 inches. Then you're going to go ahead and connect those marks. Again, connect these marks lightly. So this is a 1.5 inch grid. So inch plus a 1/2, or 1.5 inches. The grid that we have on the printout, that's just a 1 inch grid. So I'm going to rotate our paper so that we have the frame here on the left hand side and a frame on the bottom. So you might have a frame here on the right hand side, that's okay, but make sure that you have a frame here on the bottom and a frame here on the left hand side. Your paper should be sitting in front of you vertically. That means your paper is longest from top to bottom or from bottom to top. And this bottom left hand square, we should have a little small square down here on the bottom left hand. We're going to make an X. You're going to write A, B, C. So starting from the X, we're writing the ABCs here on the left hand side. And that's a G. So starting from the X across the bottom, this frame on the bottom, we're going to write numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You could draw 6 there if you want. So from here, we're going to get our printout, and we're going to go ahead and start transferring everything from the printout of the apple over to this blank sheet of paper. So we have the printout here. We're going to go ahead and lightly draw in the outline of this apple. Once we have the outline of this apple, we could probably start erasing the inside of the apple. So let's just go ahead and start drawing this apple in. Then we could erase the inside of the apple, and then we'll come back and start doing some of this shading here. So the first square that I'm going to start with, we could start down here if you want. So A1, you can draw all these details inside of each and every single box. So if there's anything inside of A1, which there isn't, you would transfer it over to this blank sheet of paper. So we can move on up to B1. There's nothing in B1, so we can move up to C1. So now we start having some details here. We have the bottom left-hand part of the apple. So we can start drawing that here on our bigger sheet of paper. So you'll find C1, so C1 here on our big sheet of paper, so C1. So we just draw every single box, one box at a time. And you could draw this slightly in case you make a mistake. And you would go ahead and do every single box, one box at a time. Again, we're just starting with the outline. We're not doing any shading yet at this point. We're just starting with the outline of this apple. So you're going to do one box at a time. We're just starting with the outline for now. So once you get to F1, it's going to cut across to the top of this apple here. Then once you get over to F3, that you should be at the end of the apple and start cutting across the bottom. Once you get to this corner here though, you should be at the corner of the apple. So start looking for small little hints of where this apple cuts across. So at this corner, you should be at the bottom of this apple here, at the top part of this apple here. So that intersection is where this apple starts curving downward. And then in E4, you're moving downward. By the time you get to D4, so D and then 4, you should be cutting across back into D3. Now we're at the bottom of the apple, and this is just going to be a rough sketch here, and then we'll kind of round this out here. So what we could do is we could start shading this in, maybe even start drawing off some of these water drops here. So you could start drawing some of these water drops. So inside of E2, I have a water drop, and you would draw an oval. So the way you draw a water drop is you could draw an oval first, and then you have this lighter part here on top. Then you have this lighter part on the bottom. So I'm just breaking off all these little pieces here. I might be drawing a little bit darker than you would. And then every single water drop has a small little shadow. So you're drawing a really small shadow. Make sure that your pencil is really sharp for this process here. So I would draw off maybe 10 or 15 water drops first before you start shading it in. And then between this highlight here, so you have a highlight here for this water drop, you would start shading it in. And once you start adding some of the value around the water drop, that's what makes these water drops really stand out. And one thing you could do too is to blend some of these water drops in, is you could get a paper towel. So you could get a paper towel. You don't need a full paper towel. You could just get a half paper towel, cut it in half. Then you're gonna fold it, and you could keep folding it in towards itself. Keep making a square until you make a triangle. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make these little points here at the end. And those points there could help you blend. So this is kind of making a blending stump. So this will help you go inside of here and blend this in without using your finger. So you can use this paper towel to help you blend without using your finger here. So what you would do is you would do your 10 water drops, 10 or 15 water drops. Okay, so once you have your water drops, go ahead and erase these lines here inside of the apple. So you should have drawn light enough where these lines and these grid marks are not there anymore, where you wouldn't be able to see them. You might still be able to see mine because I drew mine a little bit darker so that you're able to actually see in the camera. And so what you want to do when you're blending is that you want to use the side of your pencil. You don't want to really, in order to make some of these areas darker, you shouldn't be pressing more on your pencil to make these areas darker. You should maybe just be overlapping more in those areas there. So instead of pressing harder to make these areas darker, you're just overlapping more in that area there. So if you want to make this area darker, you just go over more in that area a lot more times. So it's darker here in the middle, gets lighter at the bottom. Careful with your water drops. When you're blending with a paper towel, you're not pressing too hard, you're just lightly going over and you're filling in some of these gaps here with the blending stump. So I have some white in that area there. I'm going to come over with the pencil I have already on the paper, and that's helping me blend in some of this pencil that already exists. I'm not pressing too hard with the paper towel. You're not pressing really hard. You're not applying a whole lot of pressure with the pencil, and you're not applying a whole lot of pressure with this paper towel to blend. So I'm going to keep working on this. If you have any questions about how to draw water drops or how to blend or how to make the grid, go ahead and let me know. Make sure that when you're blending or when you're adding value that you're doing circles, you're not drawing lines. If you draw lines, sometimes those stand out. So this paper towel helps me to not only blend, but to blend a little bit more accurately as well. So if I'm trying not to go outside of the apple, I can use one of the pointier ends of the paper towel. Helps me get to a little bit closer to that water drop without messing it up. And I'm not pressing too hard. I still need to kind of come in here and add a little bit more darker value to this middle part here. So I'm going to keep overlapping. Again, I'm not pressing harder to make it darker. I'm just overlapping more value, more graphite in these areas here. So it's going to take time. It's not going to happen quickly. So you could kind of tell these two values here already. So you have this lighter value and this darker value. And you might not be able to get as dark as this printout here. So remember, this is just a printout and this is just a pencil, but you want to try to get as dark as you possibly can. So that shadow there would be one of the darkest areas. The stem here, the right side of the stem would be one of the darker areas. And then this middle part here would be pretty close to that, but not as dark. All right, so since we added value, some of these water drops are actually starting to stand out a lot more. They're starting to look a lot more realistic. Right, so just me adding a couple layers of value already made that middle part stand out. So that part's pretty much done. So another thing you could do in order to avoid from smearing some of this graphite all over the piece of paper is to grab a paper towel and to rest your palm on it so you're not smearing anything around on your piece of paper and you're not getting any graphite on your hand. So this kind of allows you to place your hand on your artwork without messing it up and to actually keep working on it. Some of these erasers here too come in handy. If you need one of these erasers, let me know. They help you kind of be a little bit more accurate with some of these areas here that you might want to bring back to the color of the paper. So they help out a lot with the highlights here in case you get some graphite in some of those highlights for the water drops. So making sure that your pencil's sharp kind of helps you add those shadows to those water drops as well. So constantly make sure that your pencil's sharp. And again, use the erasers here to help you with some of those highlights. Use the paper towel to help you out with the highlights here, to blend in some of the pencil in there without using your finger. So maybe about halfway done here, and you're going to be constantly refining these shadows and these values here. One thing that I do to kind of help me figure out which parts need to be darker, which parts need to be a little bit lighter, is that I actually squint my eyes and I look at how dark some of these areas are here on the printout, and I compare that to how maybe light or dark some of these areas that are on the drawing that I've created. So if you squint your eyes, you can kind of see some of those values stand out. A lot of those darker values start to pop out. Some of those lighter values start popping out once you start squinting your eyes a little bit, and you kind of compare the printout to your drawing. So I'm about maybe halfway done here. I could probably grab this eraser and help me kind of bring back some of these areas here of the apple to kind of bring back the texture of the apple down here. But I'm pretty much almost done. There's probably some more shading that I could draw on this top part here. Again, when you're adding value, make sure that you're drawing in circles. When you're drawing in circles, it's a little bit easier to blend those circles in as opposed to just drawing on lines. Some of those lines kind of do not get blended in as easy as if you are blending in with circles. So keep refining your value, keep looking back and forth between the printout and your drawing. And if you have any questions, go ahead and let me know. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And feel free to watch any of the other related videos.